The questions we're going to be looking at is who is worthy enough to offer sacrifices and who decides? And what does that mean for us today in terms of who's worthy of us, who's worthy enough to perhaps be a leader or to be in community? It's very problematic. What does it mean to not desecrate the name of God? Is it just about not swearing or something far deeper? And how do we reconcile the Torah's mandate, one law for citizens and stranger alike, with the reality of the Israeli modern state that obviously in many horrific ways violates this principle? And can a state call itself Jewish while embracing systemic inequality? So this is what we're going to explore. We're going to lean into some of the discomfort with this text, as we always do. And that's where we find our own answers. That's where we find our transformation. And it helps us, guide us in this time. This ancient text, with all of its problems, also offers a lot of richness and opportunity, as all ancient sacred texts really do, right? They're maybe we could think of them as like calls from the past or blessings or gifts from the past for how we can do things different today in the future and in the future going forward as well. So we'll start with the blessing, the chanting and blessings before Torah study. So we can go back to the slides. Thank you, Leah. And we're on page, it's Ki Mitzion. I'm going to tell you in a minute. Page 67 in the prayer book. At the bottom, the last two lines. Ki Mitzion Tetzeh Torah, Udvar Adonai Merushalayim. Ki Mitzion Tetzeh Torah, Udvar Adonai Merushalayim. Baruch Shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Baruch Shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. The blessings before the Torah. Baruch et Adonai Hamavorach. The next page. Baruch Adonai Hamavorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu in kol ha'amin ve'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch haya shechina notenet ha'Torah. Amen. All right, so the way we do this is we screen share. Oh, let me get you guys, hang on, give me 1 second. Let me get you all prayer books. So we're in Emor. We're adding more, as I was saying. Give me a moment, which is in Leviticus. It's 21 chapter. Why am I in numbers? I don't want to be in numbers.
My line is still going.
But you're doing fine.
I'm having a low blood sugar, and I cannot turn off the alarm. So, I can either step out or I can.
Sounds like it stopped.
It did stop. I hope it will stop doing the alarm.
Because your number's actually looking.
It is now stabilizing.
Yep, good.
I'm not feeling it at this number, so
You'll be okay.
I will survive this.
Yeah. So we're gonna be
reading.
in the Torah portion.
Yeah, we're going to be reading it in English. I'm just trying to find it easy to follow. Let's see if this.
You can share this.
Yeah, you can hold this.
Yep.
Do you want another one?
No, we're good.
Okay,
That's
you're
fine.
going to share? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
We'll share.
Let me find my. Oh, it's right there. Okay, great. So now we can share on the screen. Thank you, Leah. And I wanna welcome Leah. Leah, you want to say hello and give a wave to folks? Oh, if you can make that large.
Buddy.
So Leah is our new operations and social media manager, and we're so lucky to have her with us. So if there's questions or concerns or things that come up, you obviously can chat with Leah in chat or email her after Shabbat at leah@bakedtikkun.org.
Thank you, my cat. Nice to be here.
Being here. And I just have to find it in my book here. So give me 1 second. Chapter 21, here we are. Okay. So somebody online want to unmute and read, and we'll do what I normally do, right? Is I'll interrupt at some point. I'll try to get us through a full chapter, but it just depends how I'm feeling and what we're reading. If somebody wants to unmute, please do so. And for folks here, just know that what they're reading may be different from what we're reading because each translation is a translation. So if something like is read that's different from what you have, and you're like, but wait, it says this here, and help me, let's talk about this. And you folks just read it to ask that. And what we'll do is I'll ask questions, and then we'll begin with dialogue and conversation. So it's a Torah study. It's not like I'm not going to give up a big rush. I'll give up a big rush, but it's a Torah study. And Leah, because I'm not actually on my iPad, which next time I'll remember to get on my iPad, when folks raise their hand, if you could just call them out for me, because I can't totally see who's, so forgive me folks online, I can't, from where I'm sitting, I can't see you. So I can't see whose hands are raised. So when you raise your hand, please let me know. So, but for now, we'll begin with reading. Somebody's hand is raised. I'm not sure.
Brent.
Brent, do you want to start reading, or you have a question already?
No question. I offered to start reading. That's
Great. Perfect. Please do so. Thank you.
okay. Yahweh or Adonai said to Moses, "Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, none shall defile himself for any dead person among his kin, except for the relatives that are closest to him, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, and his brother. Also, thank you. Also for a virgin sister close to him, because she has not become someone's wife, for her he may defile himself. But he shall not defile himself as a kinsman by marriage, and so profane himself. They shall not shave smooth any part of their heads, or cut the side growth of their beards, or make gashes in their flesh. They shall be holy to their God, and not profane the name of their God. For they offer Yahweh or God's offering by fire, the food of their God, and so must be holy. They shall not take into their household as their wife. They shall not take a woman defiled by harlotry, nor shall they take one divorced from her husband, for they are holy to their God. And you must treat them as holy, since they offer the food of your God. And they shall be holy to you, for I, Yahweh, Adonai, who sanctify you, am holy. When the daughter of a priest defiles herself through harlotry, it is her father whom she defiles. She shall be put to the fire. The priest who is exalted above his fellows, on whose head the anointing oil has been poured, and who has been ordained to wear the vestments, shall not bare his head or rend his vestments. He shall not go in where there is any dead body. He shall not defile himself even for his father or mother. He shall not go outside the sanctuary and profane the sanctuary of his God. For upon him is the distinction of the anointing oil of his God. mine Yahweh's, my Adonai. He may take into his household as his wife only a woman who is a virgin, a widow or a divorced woman, or one who is degraded by harlotry, such he may not take. Only a virgin of his own kin may he take as his wife, that he may not profane his offspring among his kin, for I, Adonai, Yahweh, have sanctified him. Shall I continue?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Adonai spoke further to Moses. Speak to Aaron and say, no man of your offspring throughout the ages who has a defect shall be qualified to offer the food of his God. No one at all who has a defect shall be disqualified. A defect shall be qualified. No man who is blind or lame or has a limb too short or too long. No man who has a broken leg or a broken arm, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf, or who has a growth in his eye, or who has a boil scar, or scurvy, or crushed testes. No man among the offspring of Aaron the priest who has a defect shall be qualified to offer Adonai Yahweh's offerings by fire. Having a defect, he shall not be qualified to offer the food of his God. He may eat of the food of his God, of the most holy as well as of the holy, but he shall not enter behind the curtain or come near the altar, for he has a defect. He shall not profane those places sacred to me, for I, Yahweh Adonai, has sanctified them. Thus Moses spoke to Aaron and his sons and to all the Israelites.
Great. We'll pause there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we can stop sharing for a little bit while we have the first part of our conversation. Thank you, Leah. So I want to back up for a moment. Last week we read Kedoshim. And Kedoshim laid out what is required to be holy, like what makes us holy. And it's interesting because it's not just talks about what makes us holy as individuals, but actually what makes us holy as a community. And some of the key things that are listed in Kedoshim is love of the other, of the stranger, generosity and care, like all these beautiful things that we think about in terms of holiness. And now we get to this, and it starts with right, the real question that's being asked here, right, is what is holy? How is one holy? And then it says, priests do these sacrifices, but only if you're a certain priest, only if you look a certain way, if your body functions a certain way. If not, you're not holy enough to offer God's sacrifices. So let's just open it up for conversation about this. Obviously, I'm sure that we all find this deeply disturbing and problematic, but there seems to be some obsession here about perfect bodies defined in a particular way, right? Like, so who's getting to define this? Who's writing this, right? Because I don't profess to believe that a divine source actually wrote this. Right? This is a reflection of human creating their image, right? And they want perfection. They think people's lenses are somehow, or defects are somehow problematic. So I just, it's painful to read this to me. It's clearly an ableist document. So I just want to open questions, thoughts, challenges. Is this really what makes us holy? What our bodies look like and do, and how they function? Folks want to have any thoughts? Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the easy part.
Right.
I see Brent and then Andre and then Ari and Neil.
Great. Thank you. So Brent.
Yes. What struck me, and obviously to mindfulness and awareness, some of these things are well, outdated would be I guess, a kind way of saying it. But I'm thinking it's sort of a saying we want this. They don't say good looking or pleasing. I don't think, but we want this handsome, if I can put that word in, male who doesn't have what's the word? Challenges in his background. His wife is a virgin and hasn't been married, so there's maybe that's so there cannot be gossip or misinformation about her, and well, could be. I'm thinking a perfect, or not perfect, but someone who maybe the focus won't be on his physical person having quote defect, or won't be on his family, but can provide I don't know what we call it, ideal image in some minds to the people when they come, because he does. I think the high priest does come out and make himself visible or have some functions. I'm a little my memory isn't good, but there are times when theoretically the entire assembly of Israel, or at least the men of Israel, maybe will assemble and see him. So he has, I guess they're partly worried about the way he appears at that time, and if he has baggage, so to speak, what they would consider baggage. That's a thought that came to my mind. I don't know. I've never thought of that before. I'm thinking the images we have from artist rendering of King David and other heroes. Some of them are made to look, I think, by some standards, handsome or beautiful or whatever. So that's the thought I have.
Thank you, Brent. I'm going to come back to that part of what you raised. Thank you. It's discussed by some of the rabbis, so I'll come back to it, though. Let's hear from Andre.
This is a passage that just seems to get worse and worse as it goes along to me.
Yes.
And actually, my it's interesting. The previous speaker, I was trying to get into his space, his thoughts as he was speaking, because that's a very difficult space for me to be in. My sense is that no one is worthy to offer sacrifice or to be a high priest or to speak on behalf of the community. If you listen to this carefully, it's almost saying that nobody is really worthy. I know that wasn't the intent, but that's how it struck me. I'll stop there.
Beautiful, Andre. Thank you. All right, Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah, Shabbat Shalom. So I'm reading this, I guess, a little bit differently than other people so far who've spoken. So I tend to see it as I pull back a little bit and look at how power is being utilized and how it governs, I guess, not just life and death, as in Israel and Gaza and genocide, but power can also set obligations for us and create divisions between people in unjust and inequitable ways. Certainly with respect, for example, with what was just read, sex workers. So again, power is utilized even in late liberalism that we live in now in unjust ways, as we're all seeing in extreme forms in Washington, and I see in Texas. But again, it's very patriarchal, of course. It's only the men talking about, and then with God, and then God, of course, setting these rules and regulations of how we lead, a holy life. You will be kadosh then. So again, in terms of the human dynamics that are going on around power and injustice, I don't see much different than what we're seeing today, actually, coming out of Washington and Jerusalem and many other nation states that are, doing horrible things, just as we're reading here. That's
Right.
all, I guess. Sorry, it's pretty depressing.
All of us. Yeah, it's hard times we're in, for sure. Thank you. Neil.
All right, it's always a pleasure to do Torah study with you because of the double description that we give that tends to complement each other. The three variables that were mentioned in terms of being a high priest is not to defile one's body by being around the dead, with very limited exceptions. The second being free of any kind of physical blemish. And the third one, a very puritanical view of sexuality and appropriate partners. If we take a step back and recognize that this was written within the same generation that had left Egypt, it really is not a reflection on God. It is a projection of, after such collective trauma, humiliation, and powerlessness, an attempted solution to try and regain a sense of respect. And while I don't agree with any of these things as being godly or a way to deepen one's spiritual path, it pains me deeply the level of de-emasculation that would have occurred during enslavement and the vicarious trauma of seeing what was imposed upon the women of one's community, and rather than working to empower the women, basically internalizing a sense of shame and reduplicating oppressor attitudes.
Right. Thank you, Neil. Beautiful. Liz, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. I have a couple of different thoughts. The first being that this is the description of what priests can and can't be reminds me very closely of the animal sacrifice, how the animals can't be blemished and they must be perfect and all that. So that just it strikes a very strong parallel for me. And sometimes I wonder also what's wrong with the animal that has a blemish either, but that's just me. And then secondly, I think, echoing what everyone else has said, this is echoed very strongly in our society today, both in America and many places around the world, where, and not just since Trump has been president, but in our society that has been our society in the West and probably most places, that if you're different or disabled or don't look great, or you don't have the right body or the right mind or the right color or the right what have you, you're going to be ostracized. And so that also echoed that for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, when we were reading this, the thing that occurred to me is, the whole idea that, like, God created human beings in God's image, right. And then, like, in the Hebrew tradition, God is perfection. So I just interpreted this as this notion that if, like, God is perfection, then God will be offended by anything imperfect, right? So that's where I saw this coming from. Mm-hmm. But then the other thing that occurred to me is one of the things in the Jewish tradition that I most value is the notion that, like, there is no perfection, right? Except for God. So what I find kind of troubling about this is that it's like importing this idea that God is perfect into like the world, which isn't. So there seems to be a contradiction.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Ari.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what Liz said. I think also that's one of the ways, again, power is misused in the world. Whether that we're talking about liberal multicultural societies that are misusing power, or we're talking about something from the Bible, historical. What's interesting, I think, about the obligations and these rules and regulations, and you do these things and be this way, is all of these divisions are about control, and they're about focusing the control on your practices around worship. And then, of course, animals play a role according to how the patriarchy defines animals should play the role. And, this is just, sadly, all of these ugly things have endured. I mean, let's be frank here. They have endured.
Yeah.
Despite I'm guessing that even in this time, there were people who felt like this is not right. And, but yet these horrors endure. Humanity or sapiens or whoever, whatever it is that's going on here is wrong. That's working itself through humans to control the world. And look at the earth now. I mean beyond genocide.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to throw in a few other thoughts that maybe will give rise to more thoughts. So Rashi, in addressing this section of this parsha, says that it's not fitting that a blemished priest should approach the altar. So then, of course, why is that the case? And he says because it's an insult to divine honor. So then I started thinking about this, and I thought, okay, so in some world, if God is perfect and we want to show up in honor of the divine, then we show up in our most whole selves. But we also know that the world is made with imperfect, quote unquote, difference, let's say. I won't even say imperfections. There are people are born with all sorts of differences. And I don't believe in a theological perspective that only certain people are worthy of honoring divine. I don't believe that there's a God that's not the God I believe in. Let me just say, that's not the God that I pray to. It's not the God that I honor, because the divine necessarily encapsulates and holds the contradictions of good and evil, of all diversity, right? When God created the universe, it was created with abundant diversity, with the generative possibility of even more difference and diversity. And it says, as some of you have said, right, it says a lot more about what we think is perfect or right than it says anything about God. Now, getting back to something you touched upon, Brent, there's something very interesting in the Mishnah, and the rabbis try to grapple with why is it that these priests with blemishes or defects are forbidden. And so one of the things they talk about is that when priests, and we could say rabbis today, are leading, right, people are looking at them kind of as a conduit to reach divine source and inspiration. So if somebody, and they use the example of if somebody is leading with ink on their hands, so part of it had to do with the work at the time, with their hands stained, that people would be caught staring at their hands. They would be distracted from the prayers, from the sacrifices, from the spiritual presence, the conduit of spiritual presence that we're seeking in leadership. Now, but this now, of course, gets to the question of the gaze, right? The question of the stare. So if people are distracted because of differences, which of course we are. Let's be realistic, we all are. And usually, instead of learning to engage with those differences, we're taught to try to avoid looking, which creates a whole nother distraction and issue and problem. But if people are distracted by dyed hands or other blemishes or defects of some sort or another, isn't the answer to then deal with that and not make the one who's making people stare ostracized and outside or different somehow? And it makes me think about Hebron in Palestine, Israel, where this happens now all over the place, right? Where the problem was Jewish violence, but the answer was control and constriction over Palestinian lives. And so it's the same, it's an extrapolation I'm drawing here, right? But it's the same idea. When the ones with power get to define how things are supposed to be, then the ones outside of the power structures end up being controlled and limited in their freedom, in their capacity to even be honored or holy, or to hold holy space for others. And that to me is really problematic. And when I think about it now, so trigger warning, I'm going to get a little graphic about the genocide, when we all know that children are being targeted, both for actual being killed, but also for being maimed, right? There's been, sadly, thousands of children have lost limbs. And when I think about the way that we in society treat people with different abilities, then to me, what does this mean? Right? What does it mean when we're intentionally, when Israel is intentionally creating this? It's so distressing, right? It's so heartbreaking. And if this parsha says that only, this is not what I believe is true, right? So just to be clear, the parsha seems to say that only certain people are worthy, at least of being priests. It doesn't say that only certain people are worthy of approaching or being holy, right? We're all holy. And Kiddushim, the last parsha, when we talk about how are we holy, the Torah says over and over again, we're holy by walking in God's path, by following what God does. So we'll come back to that later. I want to lead us in some type of meditation about that. But we are holy by being godlike, by trying to embody holiness of loving of the stranger, of the other. That doesn't require a particular manifestation of a body format, right? Like that transcends the limitations of our physical beings and becomes a much more spiritual, emotional way of moving in the world, right? Not just the physical manifestation. So I see a couple hands, so please.
So I just wanted, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention that the example of Hebron and again, this kind of eternal return to these violence as the answer as a result, as control as to the answer of violence rather than restorative justice seems to be problematic in many countries, actually. And the other point I wanted to make is that in anthropology, we talk about an otherwise as a space of the otherwise, where Elizabeth Povinelli, I think, has been developing this most recently, but it's come out from other people too, prior to her work. So Povinelli's otherwise is that, you know, is what happens when you are defined as outsiders in, you know, let's put it just in a very broad term, outsiders, then you do generate what she calls quasi events because they're not recognized as rising up to the events of the powerful who address the obligations to be in that place. And that has its own pushback and concept of revolutionary love or love more generally, or radical love if you look at bell hooks's work. So again, that requires that what develops in those groups that are outsiders seems to be, in many cases, and I don't want to be essentialist about this because it's always very different in very particular ways, human ways, because it's connected less to the rationality and more to the emotion and the spectrum of harm and happiness that people experience, from birth to death. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Heidi, hello. Shabbat Shalom.
Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. So I have a really basic question. When it starts out saying that the priest should not defile himself, what does that really mean?
What they're saying is that it so means like shall not contaminate, shall not make himself somehow contaminated by touching a dead person or being near a dead person. So it really means undermining his holiness. Essentially, we could think of it that way.
Okay.
Does that help?
It's that simple. It's not something more profound about his behavior or his character or anything else. It's like this simple act.
No, because you become a priest by just being in the family of priests.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Like we're uplifting the most holy in our community to be. That would be a much, can I say better? I would prefer that as priesthood, right? No, in the tradition it's just lineage. There's no particular requirement for a particular holy person. Now, Brent was, I think, trying to argue that maybe because of that, right? Like if we think of nepotism, or if we think of Trump as one example of bringing in family members or friends into government who aren't in any way, shape, or form manifesting any aspects of holiness. Maybe this is, this parsha, I think of it as a sacred, when I grapple with these texts like this, I always think of them as a sacred call for us in this time. So one sacred call in this time is for us to confront and challenge our own ableism and the ableism in our society, to confront and challenge who holds power and how they enact power and define who's worthy and who's not worthy. But also maybe it's a warning that priests who get priesthood simply by being in the right family need restrictions on who they can marry and what they can do, because they're more likely to exploit their power because they won't lose their priesthood no matter how awful they are. Now, how they choose to say you don't get to be a priest or enact priestly jobs and roles is problematic. But let's imagine for a moment it said, okay, we know that priests get their position by lineage, family lineage. So we know that means that people are likely to exploit that inherent power. What is it that we want? How do we want to place a fence, or what's the word, borders, or I'm trying to avoid the word control, guidance, guideposts around priests, so that if they step outside of those fence posts or guideposts, we know that they're not worthy of being priests anymore. Certainly, I don't think we could ask ourselves right now, like, what makes one worthy of being a spiritual leader? That's really what we're talking about here, right? I don't think it matters necessarily, maybe, who they marry, whether they have blemishes, right? What matters to us? Let's explore that. Like, what do you want in a spiritual leader? Who do you turn to? And what is it that you're wanting from spiritual leaders? And those would, for me, be the guidelines we want, right? Not just lineage. So I'm just curious, like, you think about what you want in a spiritual leader. What is it that you want? Who do you look to for your leadership? Well, and we're all leaders, right? We all are also leaders. Ari, do you want to share? I was waiting to see if someone else did, just because you shared a bit. Did you want to say something?
I still want to say something.
Yeah, go ahead. Wait 1 second, Ari. Go ahead.
And
David.
that's one of the things that I find troubling about it is that one of the things I really love about the Torah is that all of the heroes of the Torah have moral blemishes.
Right.
Yes.
And so it's like it's okay to have moral blemishes, but it's not okay to have physical blemishes.
Beautiful.
It's kind of like saying that the physical is more important than your behavior.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Right. So instead of saying, "Oh, we all have blemishes," they manifest morally, they manifest physically. There is no such thing as a perfect being. And also in Kiddushin, it doesn't say you are necessarily holy. It says you can become holy if you engage in acts that are holy, if you act in a holy way. So even Moses wasn't inherently holy. Priests aren't inherently holy. We can be holy. So it's all the possibility, yeah. And then why is it that our physical, like God doesn't, I don't think God cares if we have blemishes, quote, physical blemishes. God probably cares a lot more, I would hope, about moral blemishes. Ari, please.
Yeah, so I was intrigued by that question, about, leadership, or what are we actually looking for? I'm not sure that there's really one answer to that. So I would probably go into thinking about, a positive anarchistic kind of way of organizing an institution called religion or a government, or again, all of these divisions maybe need to be rethought, because so it's becomes not just ontological but epistemological. We look at the way we think about things and the way we organize our thinking about things, and we also look at who we are and what we become as a result of thinking about things in a different way. So I think what you run, your services, Rabbi Kat, I think are an example of a different way to organize what we're calling the Bible, what we're calling God, and what we're calling love. But yet we're not codifying that in a separate text saying that this is what we believe and this is going to be the bedrock of our belief system into the future. Again, power. So, you're keeping it more down to earth. And that's what kibbutz was for me in the early days when I was there. And so, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Heidi.
Yeah, I was taking it a slightly different way, Ari, than the way you just took it. But, the other thing that strikes me, and the humility that I feel as a human, is that everybody is changing at all time. I mean, put in the time dimension, and the likelihood that we'll be undifferent forever is just so remote. It's so unlikely. And so, if you follow this idea of, you can't even have a broken bone, you can't have scurvy. These are, temporary things. Well, we're all going to have temporary things, and we're all going to actually maybe evolve into permanent things. So it's just so hard to bring in.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Heidi. Thank you. Neil.
It raised a great question of who's worthy to lead and therefore have spiritual authority. And to put this in a larger frame of the span of theology, the most conservative version being that there's a rigid sense of perfection and that the job is basically to be an embodiment of that and impose it on others. The other end of the continuum, which most people in this congregation would be more aligned with, would be liberation theology, a spiritual leader who is sensitive to public good, social injustice, and it isn't just trying to perfect individual character traits, but also the encouraging a social consciousness of love, compassion, and inclusion.
Amen. Amen to that. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
Share. Is it okay if I share quickly?
Of course.
I think something that's coming up for me is the obsession of with distinction. And there's something about this that's like some effort to separate as and purpose to make whoever is a leader distinct, and in that process sort of erases everybody. So I was really I'm just thinking about that idea of like how we need to create distinction.
Beautiful. And you know what's interesting is the Torah in Bereshit, in Genesis, is all about distinguishing, right? Morning from night, light from darkness, this animals and all these things. So there is a way in which the distinction matters, right? Difference matters. We distinguish between the holy time and the non-holy times, right? Tonight I'll light the Havdalah candle to distinguish between the time of holiness of Shabbat and the time of regular time. But also, right, I think the goal is to make that more fluid so that we take something from Shabbat, something that felt holy or sacred or special, and carry it into our regular time so that quote unquote regular time, whole, becomes more holy, right? Is infused with more holiness. And of course, the world is infused with all of that. So yeah, it's an interesting, there is an obsession in many ways about distinguishing, and sometimes that may be necessary and important and we may appreciate it and it might nourish us. And at other times it creates walls instead of bridges, right? So that raises for me, of course, the walls that we build, literally and figuratively, to separate, or the story of the chosen people to distinguish us from other people instead of really seeing the shared humanity and wholeness of it all. Thank you. Beautiful. Andre.
As I listen to these terrific comments from people and thinking about it, my mind keeps drifting over into the question of who is worthy to lead. It bleeds into or begs the question of who is worthy to follow. And I don't know, that then poses to me a whole separate series of issues or questions. But anyway, if we take the worship experience or the meditation experience as a whole, it includes leaders and followers and rabbis who lead and those of us who follow and pray along. And it seems like to me like the whole experience needs to be considered in that context and not just the leader.
Beautiful. There's a whole concept about creating communities that are both leaderful and followerful, right? That have both, right? You don't have a leader unless you have, I don't love the term follower, but unless you have participants or people within the community within you. And then the ideal is, right, to lift up so we're all become leaders and we all become participants or followers, however we want to use those terms. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Okay, we ready to keep reading? Which, Liz, we will get to the blemished animals. Great. Somebody want to pick up chapter 22, and we'll read the whole chapter. You might read the next one too. We'll see. Heidi or Jacqueline, you want to read?
Yeah, I'll read.
Thank you, Heidi.
Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, "Instruct Aaron and his sons to be scrupulous about the sacred donations that the Israelite people consecrate to me, lest they profane my holy name, mine, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's. Say to them, throughout the ages, if any man among your offspring, while in a state of impurity, partakes of any sacred donation that the Israelite people may consecrate to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, that person shall be cut off from before me. I am Yud He Vav He. No man of Aaron's offspring who has an eruption or a discharge shall eat of the sacred donations until he is pure. If one touches anything made impure by a corpse, or if a man has an emission of semen, whoops, the person, the person who touches shall be impure until evening and shall not eat of the sacred donations unless he has washed his body in water. As soon as the sun sets, he shall be pure, and afterward he may eat of the sacred donations, for they are his food. I think we went a little too far, Leah. Did we? Okay. They shall they shall keep my charge, lest they incur guilt thereby and die for it, having committed profanation. I, Yud He Vav He, consecrate them. No lay person shall eat of the sacred donations. No bound or hired laborer of a priest shall eat of the sacred donations. Oy.
So I want to say one thing. So the reason why this is saying this is the priest, their food comes from donations. Their sustainability comes from donations. So abstractly, that's a beautiful imagine, right? Like that's something beautiful to imagine. But that's why I keep saying that. So they get to eat it later because otherwise they won't eat. So go ahead, Heidi.
But a person who is a priest's property by purchase may eat of them, and those that are born into his household may eat of his food. If a priest's daughter becomes a layman's wife, she may not eat of the sacred gifts. But if the priest's daughter is widowed or divorced and without offspring and is back in her father's home as in her youth, she may eat of her father's food. No lay person may eat of it. But if any of the party eats of the sacred donation unwittingly, the priest shall be paid for the sacred donation, adding 1/5 of its value. But the priests must not allow the Israelites to profane the sacred donation that they set aside for Yud He Vav He, or to incur guilt requiring a penalty payment by eating such sacred donations, for it is I, Yud He Vav He, who make them sacred. Yud He Vav He spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons and to all the Israelite people, and say to them, when any person of the house of Israel or of the strangers in Israel presents a burnt offering as the offering for any of the votive or any of the free will offerings that they offer to Yud He Vav He, it must, to be acceptable in your favor, be a male without blemish from cattle or sheep or goats. You shall not offer any that has a defect, for it will not be accepted in your favor. And when any party offers from the herd or the flock a sacrifice of well-being to Yud He Vav He for an explicit vow or as a free will offering, it must be acceptable be without blemish. There must be no defect in it. Anything blind or injured or maimed, or with a wen, boil scar, or scurvy, such you shall not offer Yud He Vav He. You shall not put any of them on the altar as offerings by fire to Yud He Vav He. You may, however, present as a free will offering an ox or a sheep with a limb extended or contracted, but it will not be accepted for a vow. You shall not offer Yud He Vav He anything with its testes bruised or crushed or torn or cut. You shall have no such practices in your own land, nor shall you accept such animals from a foreigner for offering as food for your God. For they are mutilated, they have a defect, they shall not be accepted in your favor. Yud He Vav He spoke to Moses, when an ox or a sheep or a goat is born, it shall stay 7 days with its mother, and from the 8th day on, it shall be acceptable as an offering by fire to Yud He Vav He. However, no animal from the herd or from the flock shall be slaughtered on the same day with its young. When you sacrifice a thanksgiving offering to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, sacrifice it so that it may be acceptable in your favor. It shall be eaten only on the same day. You shall not leave any of it until the morning. I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall faithfully observe my commandments. I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall not profane my holy name, that I may be sanctified in the midst of the Israelite people. I, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, who sanctify you. I brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh.
Thank you. Whew.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things I was thinking about just rereading this now is, go with me here for a moment, if you will, is I was wondering if maybe part of what's happening with the non-blemished animals are the only ones that can be offered is that I could imagine people are having to offer animals. That's not like that's expensive, right? That's a big deal. They're not just like throwing pennies or crumbs, right? They have to give something of meaning when they're making a sacrifice. It has to be something that is valuable and important to them. And if there wasn't this requirement, they might just give the animal that they can't eat or that doesn't have value to them. And instead, what they're being told is you have to give something of value. It actually has to be something that is a struggle or at least important. So maybe that's a stretch, perhaps, but I'm gonna make the argument anyway that perhaps what's happening here is, and also you're giving it as a gift to people who depend upon your gifts to eat. And so if you're giving a gift both to God, right, you have to offer something meaningful, and to other people, you always, right, when we're serving guests, we generally don't give them the crumbs, right? As my mother used to say, family hold back. Like you hold back for yourself and let other people have the goods, if you will. So maybe this is a hospitality thing, both for God and for the priest. It's definitely still seems to be making the argument that unblemished or non-defected animals are somehow more holy or more worthy. And that obviously is deeply problematic, but I'm just trying to spin it slightly differently. So I see Heidi and Neil.
Yeah, as I was reading it, Kat, it was really helpful to think about that this is both an offering to God, but also an offering, a necessity for the priest. And I had that same feeling like you really have to sacrifice. It's not enough to just give. You have to really give something of worth or value or something you will get your attention to move into, the spirit of the divine. And I think, just really from the standpoint of the health of the recipient, it really helps that it's decent food and not just, leftovers or yesterday's or whatever.
Yeah, thank you. Neil.
Well, there's a lot to this, and I'll let others comment on that. The one part that I loved was by institutionalizing, you have to eat it in one day. It's sort of a countervalence against hoarding and creating stinginess. If you have to eat it in one day, you're likely to have a wider cycle of who is given an opportunity to participate. And to use a grassroots term, we want this to be bottom up, not powered down.
Beautiful. Right. Yeah, when you have to eat it in the day, then you can't hoard, so you're more likely to share. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that from the point of view of the blemished animals, they live a longer life. So that's interesting, but again, creates a division within the animals where some animals, those who are pure, will be holy and we will sacrifice them. So, I mean, the whole thing is just, again, sapiens controlling, dividing. up the world the way they want to, so they can lead their little power structures into glorious days of power structures. That's it.
What I also found interesting is it ends with, I am Yud He Vav He who sanctifies you. I took you out of the land of Egypt to be holy, a God to you, to be something that I am Yud He Vav He. That phrasing is only used in certain places to kind of be the bookmark, the bookend, excuse me, to the idea of what I've just said. I'm saying because I took you out of Egypt. So there's some connection here between liberation, between freedom and sacrifice, and what we're sacrificing and how we're doing it. It matters so much that it has to be said, like, I'm not just God. It's not just saying I am Yud He Vav He. It's saying I am Yud He Vav He who took you out of the narrow consciousness of constriction and slavery, right? It's what I said in the prayers, right? I am the one that showed you that systems and structures of oppression are not fundamental to the universe itself, and therefore can and must be overturned by you human beings. That's what's being said here, right?
But we're not going to sacrifice Egyptians. We're not going to go back and pull Egyptians and sacrifice them. We're going to sacrifice the animals. So I guess in a liberal society, you might suggest that, I wouldn't, but it might be suggested that this is already a higher level of relationship to what happened to us in Egypt. And we're trying to separate ourselves from the genocide. So now we're going to do something else, but it's going to be to animals instead of,
And now what happens when we're the Egyptians, so to speak?
Yeah, I know. I know. I was going there, but you're right. I don't know what to say about that. So I did want to say that a lot of this has to do with even, I think the traditional interpretations, I think of, the sacred and the profane, which is being divided up here, and also this positioning with respect to animals and blemishes and things that it is related to health too. I think that has to be. I think there was less knowledge about which blemishes would be dangerous to health and everything. And if we're sacrificing animals that might have some disease that we might be able to contract, this might be a problem. So, I mean, it's not written out that way though, is it? Right. So, but maybe that is going on too. I don't know.
Yeah. So what happens when we become the ones that are doing the unholy act, and how do we separate ourselves, and how do we, if we're now,
we put the leaders in jail for, we return to a state of law and put the leaders in jail. But I mean, it's apparently we have to leave a state of law to be returned to it with new meaning, maybe, to put a spin on there.
The Society of Egypt or Israel or the United States is it's not just the leaders.
No, I know. Yeah, it's the people. The followers are out in the streets doing things that are just awful too. Some of them, not all of them.
Yeah. So it's how do we re-sanctify and remind ourselves that we were the ones who were taken out of Egypt. We're not supposed to. I've said this before, right? We're not supposed to tell the story of being taken out of Egypt to connect to our oppressive history, to our history as oppressed people. That's not the point. The point is to connect to our liberation and to connect to the journey from the oppression to the liberation. It's not to say, oh, look at me, I'm a victim, I'm going to wrap myself in my victimhood. That's not what this Torah is trying to teach us. It's the exact opposite. It says, you're doing these things because I took you out of that constricted place. Now we're wandering in the desert for 40 years because you can't seem to deconstruct the oppressive system that is within you psychologically and spiritually. So you can't even make it into the promised land because you can't deconstruct that. You can't unclothe yourself, if you will. But here we are, and we're doing it. And so, maybe we just need to return to an actual desert and journey in struggle and strife and feel the precarity of life, the fragility of having food and not having water, and like for ourselves instead of imposing that and creating that on others. Anyway, so let's I'm going to just tell you the next section, and I want to just finish with the last section. So the next chapter, I'm just going to tell you, it sets off, now we move into, I am the one who took you out of Egypt, out of slavery, and so now it goes into all the festivals. It goes into Pesach, counting the Emor, where we are right now, like this time where we count from our liberation till Shavuot, when we receive the Torah, the time of the highest holiness, and the journey from liberation to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. It's like, that's the counting of the Emor. That's what Neil mentioned early in our prayers. And we count it to help elevate ourselves, like stepping along the way. It's, gosh, oy, what a mess we're in. So on Shavuot, I'll just say, and we'll talk about it in announcements, I'm going to be doing a morning sunrise. It will only be in person, but if you're local, prayer, we'll do morning prayers and then a guided meditation about around what Torah we need to receive today. We'll record the meditation and we'll send it out after the fact. So if you can't make it, you can get that. So we have this, so then we have counting the Emor, then Shavuot, and then it takes us to Rosh Hashanah. Right before it talks about Rosh Hashanah, it has this line that I'm sure we're all familiar with. I'm at for those of you here, 23:22. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not completely remove the corners of your field as you reap. You shall not gather the gleanings of your harvest. For the poor and the stranger you shall leave them. I am Hashem, your God. So here, right here, it doesn't say, I am Hashem, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt. It just says, I am Hashem, your God. Be holy like me. Make sure there's enough food for people who need it. Don't just hoard. And it's connected to Rosh Hashanah, interestingly, perhaps, because in Jeremiah, in one of the prophets, Jeremiah talks about the fact that other nations are destroyed because they're not generous, because they don't leave the corner of their fields for the stranger and for the needy and for the poor. But Israel, if they were to follow these rules, would be spared the destruction of their land and being kicked off the land. And on Rosh Hashanah, so we can bookmark that, right? Like, what will happen to Israel given what's happening. But on Rosh Hashanah, you may, if you've come to services, mine or others, it's this time when we acknowledge the sovereignty of the divine, right? Like the divine, I mean, you might hear me say at Rosh Hashanah, like, I wish there was this God I believed in that would take over the running of this world because we're screwing it up. And I want this God to take over and make it right. But I don't believe in that God. But on some level, right, we just for a day, 2 days, we just like try to give over ourselves and the world to God and submit ourselves humbly. And that would mean acknowledging that we don't own things, that anything we have is a gift of the divine, including land, including food. And so it's God that owns the land. And in Leviticus, it teaches that very thing. You are mere sojourners on this land. You don't own it. Don't get all haughty and think that, everything you have is from your own hands. It's not. It's from the divine, including your gifts. They're all from divine source. And so I think that this line right before Rosh Hashanah, the rabbis teach, is connected because it's like we're reminding ourselves that it's the divine that owns land, that controls the world. And so therefore we have to leave the corners for the poor and the stranger. And it's a reminder, right, that if we don't, remember the prayer, the Vihaya'im Shemoah that I did in English, right? If we create unjust systems, political, social, economic systems, and the ecological and environmental system becomes unjust as well. So it's a teaching about the interconnectedness of all life, of systems and structures, of human life, of plant life, of animal life, of the planet itself, that we're all interconnected. And so let's, I want to just get to chapter 24. And really, I just want to get to, give me 1 second here. Okay, we'll read all of chapter 24. We've got a little bit of time. So if we could go ahead to chapter 24, line 1. It's in the same parsha. And then if somebody, Heidi, if you are willing to keep reading, it's not that long.
Sure, unless anybody else wants to, I'm happy to turn it over.
I'll read if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, "Command the Israelite people to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. Aaron shall set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain of the pact to burn from evening to morning before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh regularly. It is a law for all time throughout the ages. He shall set up the lamps on the pure lampstand before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to burn regularly. You shall take choice flour and bake of it 12 loaves, 2/10 of a measure for each loaf. Place them on the pure table before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in 2 rows, 6 to a row. With each row you shall place pure frankincense, which is to be a token offering for the bread, as an offering by fire to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He shall arrange them before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh regularly every Sabbath day. It is a commitment for all time on the part of the Israelites. They shall belong to Aaron and his sons, who shall eat them in a sacred precinct, for they are his as most holy things from Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's offerings by fire, a due for all time." Then came out among the Israelites a man whose mother was Israelite and whose father was Egyptian. And a fight broke out in the camp between the half-Israelite and a certain Israelite. The son of the Israelite woman pronounced the name in blasphemy, and he was brought to Moses. Now his mother's name was Shelomit, daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan, and he was placed in custody until the decision of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh should be made clear to them. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the blasphemer outside the camp, and let all who are within hearing lay their hands upon his head, and let the community leadership stone him." And to the Israelite people speak thus: "Anyone who blasphemes God shall bear the guilt, and one who also pronounces the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh shall be put to death. The community leadership shall stone that person, stranger or citizen, having thus pronounced the name, and shall be put to death. If any party kills a human being, that person shall be put to death. One who kills a beast shall make restitution for it, life for life. If any party maims another person, what was done shall be done in return. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The injury inflicted on a human being shall be inflicted in return. One who kills a beast shall make restitution for it, but one who kills a human being shall be put to death. You shall have one standard for stranger and citizen alike, for I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. For I, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, am your God." Moses spoke thus to the Israelites, and they took the blasphemer outside the camp and pelted him with stones. The Israelites did as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had commanded Moses.
Whew. Lovely. Okay, so I'll say a few things about this. I want to clarify one thing when it says, if it's line 17, and a man, if he strikes mortally any human life, he shall be put to death. It's mot yamut, which means he shall surely die. It doesn't actually say he should be put to death. Now the rabbis grapple with death penalty, and they come up with this. This is where the rabbis do some really wonderful nonviolent transformation of our Torah. And they say that any society that puts to death someone within like one person in like 100 years, they are not a just society. So the rabbis say basically no death penalty. That's not good. And this eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth that we all grapple with, and that people bring out all the time about how horrible the Torah is arguably, the rabbis and others argue, that it's a response to what would happen in ancient societies in many other places, which is if somebody took something from you, they'd kill you. So what they're trying to say here basically is you can't kill people for torts, for harming you or for stealing from you, for theft. But if you physically hurt someone, then there's consequences that mirror what the harm was. So there has to be some equitable justice. Now, right, we don't want to do an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, obviously. But that's the argument, is that the punishment for crimes was so disproportionate so as to be unjust. So this is a course correction. And our Torah is written at a time when that's the best course correction they could come up with. And we're in a different time, and we know that this is not a good enough course correction. So our course correction to this is we need restorative justice. We need reparations. We need to look at power imbalances and structures to figure out why someone might be stealing or what happened that led to the violence. We get to continually, that's the beautiful thing about the teaching, that we're constantly receiving Torah, right? We're constantly receiving messages from divine, and that means from the divinity within each other, right? When we're in community, we learn new things. We learn how to recreate systems and societies that are even more just over the course of history. It's an evolution. This is one place of our evolution, and it's not the end of our evolution. And where we are today is most certainly not the end of our evolution. It might be the demise of our existence, but it's not the end of the possibility of human evolution. We just might end up destroying ourselves and the planet. And so our evolution as humans might not be able to evolve further. We'll see. But the other thing that's in here that's so powerful is there shall be one law for you. It shall be the same for the stranger and for you yourself. For I, Yud-He, Vav-He, I'm your God. So this is a counter, right, to this apartheid laws, to the different laws that exist anywhere in the world where Jews live, at least, between us and them. No, that's not what's happening here. There's one law. If you get to building permits, so does the stranger, the so-called stranger. Now, of course, they're not strangers on the land, but they're strangers in the way that they are not citizens, or they certainly aren't citizens. They're not Jews. If you think of Israel as a Jewish nation, which I do not, because it's not following these laws. So, and the other thing is about, taking the one who blasphemed God and killing him, right? It's again, obviously I don't believe in any of death penalty or killing somebody for something. But when I think about not only what Israel's doing, but what Jewish legacy organizations are not doing or doing in this moment of genocide and ethnic cleansing and apartheid, the silence, the complicity, the reporting people to our government to get them swept off our streets, that is the blasphemy of the divine, right? Swearing in God's name or using God's name without sanctifying it or thinking about it in holy ways is not, to me, what really matters when we're talking about dismissing the divine, right? What matters is there are soldiers taking the Torah out and using a sword to read from the Torah. They're literally using a weapon to read from our sacred texts. They're not, and they're certainly not, right, like pounding it into plowshares and pounding it into rakes and tools for harvesting the land, right? They're using it to kill people and to create harm on our sacred texts. That is blasphemy. And that's how I understand it to be. So before I want to do a short meditation. I just want to check our time.
It is 12:12.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so does anyone else want to share anything from this? And then I'm just going to lead us into a short meditation. Okay.
Brent has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Brent. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Rabbi, for your last remarks. Hard as it is to need to accept that, but I appreciate your remarks very much, and your work with I forget, Rabbis for Ceasefire. I forget which organization. I mean, that's very much appreciated. So may you and the others participating in such efforts be strengthened and continue and have success much as soon as we can conceive. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much. So I mentioned that this parsha is on the heels of Kiddushim, and the concept of holiness and what it means to be holy and how do we embody holiness is the theme really of these parashot. And actually next week as well, and I'll do my video musing, so you'll receive that. I'll be out of town with my children, one of my children and his wife. So, but I will do a recording before then. But I wanted to just, I don't know about you, but it's in this horror, both here and in Israel and so many places, it's hard to know what to do and how to do it and how to be our most holy selves. So I just wanted to do a guided meditation to help each of us, each of you, find within yourself, what is your holy space? What does it mean for you to be walking in God's path? Because each of us are different. Here's where distinction and difference is a beautiful thing. Each of us have our own gifts and talents to bring into this world, to bring into this movement. I was listening to Daniel Day, the actor in England, who climbed Big Ben, the tower in England, and for 16 hours he was up there and he put out a Palestinian, he actually wasn't a flag, a keffiyeh, and he shut down traffic, and now he was in jail for quite a while, and now his hearing's not for a year, but he said, we each have a gift that we can bring to the movement. He could climb a tower and stop traffic for a day. Some of us might be willing to do that and risk arrest. Others of us are going to do other things. But each of us have a gift within us to bring forth, to walk in God's way. So I'm going to invite you now to close your eyes and just feel yourself wherever it is that you are, on your chair or couch, or if your feet are touching the ground. Feel the earth beneath the floor. The sacred, holy earth that holds us. The dust of the earth from where we come and to which we will return. Feel the energy of the earth and the groundedness rising up through your feet, your ankles, your shins and calves, through your knees and thighs. Feel it in your bottom and your back, your whole spine, in your shoulders and your arms, your elbows and wrists. hands and fingers. Feel it all the way up to your head. Feel the connection between your body and your clothes, and the object that you're sitting on. Now draw down energy from above. Imagine that there's energetic light. You can picture a light or just flowing energy, whatever it is that works for you. Picture that energy coming through your crown chakra. And imagine it like a gentle, warm, beautiful waterfall, slowly going down your head, your neck, and it spreads out over your shoulders and your arms, down your chest and back, belly, your core, down all the way down your spine and your bottom, front and back of your legs, into your feet. Just see if you can feel that flow of energy going down, up from the earth and down from above, just circulating in your body. And as you feel that, and if you don't feel it, that's totally fine. Just allow yourself to breathe and be present. Imagine, see if you can feel that energy expanding to encircle you into a sacred container for right now. Like a swirl coming up and swirling around you, above your head, around your body, and back down below your feet. See if you can tap into, maybe it was a child you or a place you've experienced in your life where you knew who you were, who you are. Maybe you know it now in this world. The core essence of you, the beautiful, holy, whole being that you are. And allow yourself to acknowledge and hold onto the fact that this core being is the manifestation of the divine in you. You are a spark of divine in this world. What are the ways that you nurture that divinity within you? And how do you manifest that divinity beyond yourself in the world? Our world is so broken. This divine spark within you is just yearning to be free, to manifest itself fully in you and in this world. What is your divine gift? Your spark. And how can you walk in God's path? I invite you to find one gem that came to you. If it hasn't come to you, that's totally fine. You can return to this later. There's no right way, there's no defect in this process. And now imagine holding that little gem in your hand. Just touch your heart. Imagine the swirling energy around you again, all around your whole body, above your head and below your feet. With this sweet gem, this divine spark of you is now sealed within you. And if you lose your way, if you miss the mark, if you get confused or baffled in these times, God knows that's easy. You get pulled and distracted by the trappings of our world. Put your hands back on your heart. Bring the swirling energy around you. Picture this moment and return to it again and again to nourish and ground you. I invite you to take your hands off your heart and open it up to the world, to each other. It's an act of both humility and offering and receiving divine sparks from others. Offer yours, you receive others. Because when our divine sparks can touch one another, we can repair the broken vessels and return both to our individual wholeness and our collective wholeness. As you take a breath, I'm going to invite you to raise your hands above your head. Release, and then release your arms down by your side if you have room. Just bring your hands to prayer in front of your heart, in front of your third eye, to your crown chakra. Do a slight bow if you like. Back up, and release your hands down, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Now we return to the closing blessings and prayers. We do the blessings after the Torah reading. Page 69, perfect. Bottom 69. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher natan lanu Torah temeretz v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Ruha Shekhinah notenet haTorah. Amen.